going on, everybody? So I haven't done this in a little while, and I'm not very good at it, and I don't have the technology for it. I run everything off my iPhone. Where's that little creature come from? But it's good enough, and you can get the gist of it. And I thought what we would do is a few wheel swaps on some of the more common cars, some of the cars that you guys really like, that you're always grabbing at, and have some coffee. Anybody have afternoon coffee? Okay, so I'm at the bench. I can't really see your comments and other things because it's over on the shipping table. So what I'm going to start out with, and I hope everybody's seeing this right and not backwards and anything goofy. Anyways, what I'm going to start out with is the Nova Wagon. This is a really great casting. This is a nice color. The blue, the satin blue, is really cool. One thing to know about the Nova is that you can't use the bigger 13 millimeter drag slicks on it. You can use these on the 55 Chevys, and they'll clear just fine. I mean, you can use these, you can do anything you want as long as you're ready to go to work on it, right? But these won't clear really, and you'll have a rough roll. They're really tight in the fender wells. So if you get the smaller, straight up 12 millimeter tires, basically 12 millimeter tires of any kind, they'll fit in that fender well, and you'll be in good shape. See, quite a bit of difference. A millimeter makes quite a bit of difference, especially once it's packed with a wheel. When you pack it with a wheel, it gets bigger, it gets inflated. Okay, so I have a lot of videos, not a lot of videos. I have videos on YouTube that nobody ever watches and then says, hey, how do you do this? And I'm like, you haven't seen this yet then, have you? But anyways, I have videos on how to do this with an iron and get things pretty cool by yourself. I save a lot of my axles, and I'm never like, oh, do I need a short axle or a long axle, or what's going to fit this and what's not going to fit this. Also, I don't drill and tap. I never have. I found a better way to do it, and I've never drilled and tapped a car. To do a wheel swap especially, because I do it the way that I do it, but to do any customizing, I never pick cars that are metal bottom casting. That's the ones you have to drill. So what I do is I've got my trusty needle nose pliers, right? And make sure you got your mask on and some good ventilation, because you're about to melt plastic. And I know some of you are going to say, well, what about the wheel? I want to save the wheel. I don't know. Do 2 cars, then you have the wheels. So I've got my Weller 40 watt iron. A smaller iron will work too. 20 watt will work, 15 watt will work, doesn't really matter. And what you want to do is you want to hold that wheel with your needle nose and go right in the top on the axle head, and that'll melt. Do not inhale that. Have your mask, get way away from it. Right? Bam. There's your wheels off. Right? You've got your axles free inside. Inside the bottom of this car right here is a rear end. There's another, let's call it a bearing, inside the plastic in here. So even though you glue this wheel on and maybe you glue this wheel on, there's still a way for it to spin inside the car. And we're going to look at this one. So in the inside, there's this plastic tab that holds the axle in place, and then like a fork, the body goes down on top of that axle, and it holds everything when it's crimped together in the car. So even if you glue these 2 bearings, we'll call them the wheels, on, you still have that center that's in there, so your car will still roll. You'll still have full functionality of your car, and it'll be tough, and anybody can roll it and play with it. I get asked this all the time. How's the performance of a rubber tire car? It's horrible. It's a rubber tire car. My regular cars outrace my rubber tire car. Yeah, stop racing it. Put it back up on the shelf in the case where it's supposed to be. However, a good car should roll. And you shouldn't be able to see the factory differences when you're done. I don't like to cut up the cars. I don't like to cut up the hoods and make the doors open and do all this other crazy custom things that other guys like to do. Oh, and then we just take our regular, let's see, what do we call, we're not supposed to call these what they are anymore, but cutters. You use your angle cutters. That's what they're called. Okay, so these are angle cutters. You can pick them up at any tool store. Once you have that one wheel melted off, you can just get behind there and snip that axle, and then you can pull this out. And what you want to do is save that. That's like what I've got all over here, right? And then we're just going to do the same thing for the front. Grab it with your needle nose pliers. With your mask and your ventilation, you take your weller and you drop it right down on the top of that axle head, right? You melt it, pull it off, it comes right off. You'll burn yourself too, so be damn careful when you're doing all of this. If you're under 18 or something, get your folks to help you out, or somebody that's willing to get burned. So again, I just went behind it there with the angle cutters. Now I can pull my axles out, and I save my axles because I build all my axles. There's no reason to say, is it short, long, I don't know what to do. You know, and now you've got your car without the bottom pulled apart, so you're not trying to make all kinds of weird tubed axles and melt this in and glue that in, and it's just a very simple thing. So now we get to pick out our wheels and what we're going to do. This is you know, a beautiful satin blue, right? But it's got the chrome interior because Hot Wheels is outrageous. Every race car I've ever had, I've totally wanted to have a chrome interior so I could be fully blinded. So anyways, it's satin and chrome, right? Because it's got some bling to it too. So here's where you have to decide what you're going to do as far as your wheels. You're going to throw something on that matches the satin feel of it, maybe with a satin black wheel. Or something more traditional with maybe some sort of skinnies in the front. I think some steel wheels. I always like steel wheels. Steel wheels are where it's at. And again, you have to use the smaller rear, you know, but still big. You have to use the smaller rear wheel. I think I'm going to go with the skinny in the front, of course. So let's throw that on. That'll be a great starting point. And what I do is I just snip the head off the axle, snip the tab off the axle. Have your glasses on, because these little bastards they'll come at you. They'll get you. They'll find you. Okay, so now I've got my axle out. My car's free and clear. I always go from the passenger side. So if you see my cars, they'll always be started on the passenger side. That way, I always know what I'm doing. They're always done the same way, and I never lose track of what I've done and what I haven't done. And then trim the axle, right, with your angle cutters. And a good starting point is inside the fender well. You know for sure that axle's not going to stick out past the fender well, is it? Right? So the first trim you want to make, inside the fender well. And then test fit your wheel. Grab it and throw it on there and make sure that both sides are where you want them to be. You don't want the axle to be hanging out the end of this a long ways. And then trim it up if need be. Take a little piece off of it. Again, make sure that doesn't hit you anywhere because it hurts. It's coming off of there at 900 miles an hour. All right, so if test fit it, I know that that's where I like it to be. And now I'm just going to hit that up with some gel. I use the Gorilla Glue, and I use the green top, the gel. Crazy Glue and the other glues are crazy, right? So they have a lot of chemicals in them, and when you put those glues on these cars, it fogs the windows, it messes up the plastic, it really jacks everything up. So, excuse me, what I do is just get a little tiny dot. That's all you need. Little tiny dot on the end of that axle, okay? And then you grab your wheel and you slowly put it on there and work that gel into the wheel and the axle. Maybe pull it off once, move it around, wiggle it around, and then set it where you want it. So I use these Q-tip sticks, and that way I can push it in there, push the axle in, right? And now just let it dry for a second. Okay, so we're gonna let that dry just like that while we try to figure out what the heck we're gonna put in the back. And if you really want to, I'm gonna drink my coffee here. If you really want to, you can save these axle tabs off of your axles, and when you're done with this, you can put those tabs on the end right there to make it match this side. But here's the deal, and maybe you've seen my videos before. I hate that. I hate that tab. It makes it look like it's a wagon, like it's, you know, something you drag around when you're a kid. I like that much better. It's a clean hub axle hole. You know what I mean? It's like it's supposed to be like that, like a 60s hot rod or whatever it is. Okay, so this one's already dried up enough. You don't need to dry it too much. And what you want to do is that glued wheel, just break the surface tension between the wheel, right, and the car. Okay, because there's going to be a little bit of leftover gel glue in there, right? But if you just break that tension in there, now the only thing that it's glued to is the axle. So now, because you've got that extra transaxle rear end bearing inside, you've got one wheel that's still free under the axle cap, you're good to go. You've got a fully functional rolling car. This is dried and can be played with and handled if you have a nephew that, you know, gets out of hand. And I think for this one, we'll do that traditional Gasser rear wheel to go with it. Give me just a second, I'll have this sucker going. Okay, again guys, if you're commenting on the video, I can't really see it right now, but I can talk to you later. Okay, so I'm just gonna do the traditional hot rod mag. Oh, that's interesting. There's a dragonfly in here. This is a really nice clean look, right? It goes with the front, so you're not getting anything funny, and everybody loves it. So again, don't let it hit you. Cut your top off. You can chase it down, or you can collect yours. Here, I'll show you another trick. Okay, let's say that you do want to keep this axle tab, right? Because you're going to put it on the other axle. What you can do is you can take your angle cutters and put this in here like this, so that your axle tab is on the inside of the angle cutters, and then just hold it on the bench when you cut it, and take this axle and hold it and then cut it, right? And that saves your little tab right there, right under in that pocket. And then you can just take your tab and you can glue it on. Now, the way that I do it, when I do it, is I will put a tiny dab on that hub hole. Just a little tiny dab on that hub hole. And you might even want to use another axle to dab on the glue and then put it in there. And then I take, of course, they're not here right now, are they? Because I was using them. I take very, very sharp tweezers, and I grab that little sucker up, and then I just drop it on the top of that glue, and it sticks, and everything's golden. But man, you've got to be under 30, because you get too shaky, you know what I mean? All right, so we've clipped this one. I saved my axles and everything so that I can build my own. Again, I go in passenger side. Right, so I know where I'm at now. This is a 12mm wheel, a 12mm tire, and everything matches up really nice on the little Nova. What I'll do is let's check this out. So there's the 13mm, you know, the big one, and it's got a lot of rub. I mean, you can use it, and if you like the way that those things look with the pizza cutter, is what we call them, but those are cheater slicks. Anyways, the regular 12mm works very nicely on the little Novas. And then again, you go back over here, and where are we going to start? We're going to start inside the fender well for sure. All right, and then we're going to test fit see what's up. I got it poking out a little bit this side, so I want to set it. I want to set it better. Right, set it in there better. And now, well, it's kind of hard sometimes, you know, and hold it together. And just make sure that that axle's not sticking out of the hub and everything was looking weird. And it's not, we're good. So, back down to our little, tiny little gel in there. Tiny little gel. And then work it in. And you can feel it, you can tell. And you got it nice, roll it. And then remember to set it. And sometimes some cars, you don't want to set it too far. You want to leave a little slack in between here so that it'll roll a little better if you leave that a little bit loose. All right, so now we're gonna let it dry up. You don't have to let it sit that long. It just has to tack up, and that way it'll stick to just the axles, because that's what you want it to stick to, is the axles, not the car. So this is a really easy, straightforward car to do, right? The fenders are nice and high. It's easy to get the axles in and out, different things like that, right? So that's a nice beginner car, and really neat when you get done. And then again, just break that tension in between the car and the wheel, and now you're stuck with you know, the wheel nice on the axles, and everything's good. If these dry, when these dry, you can't pry them off with a screwdriver even. It locks, it sets. It does a chemical bond between the axle and the plastic of the wheel, and so you end up just destroying the wheel. So you can be very confident that when you glue these on properly, like I just showed you, and get everything done, those wheels are not going to come off. All right, so like I said, that one's pretty easy. It's pretty straightforward. Let's try something that's a little bit, I don't know, not advanced, but a little bit harder because of the way that the car's built. Let me get a drink of my coffee over here. It's getting cold. Talk. Can you guys see my coffee cup? You like that? I love this coffee cup. I got it brand new, dropped it, and it didn't break, and I was like, man, that's the one for me. Okay, let's talk about the 55 Chevy a little bit. Everybody loves this one, which I do too. It's really a great car. But unlike the other one, half of it is buried in the fender. The front's pretty easy. We can get to that. We can grab that and pull that out. But the back's a little bit more difficult. And it's the same as would be on the Dodges and some of the other skirted cars, right? All right, so here's the second point to the 55. And I see this mistake made a lot. And you just don't consider it when you're buying the wheels, or you've never done it and you don't know about it. There is a big difference between, let me grab another car here. Oh, the El Camino is a great example. There's a big difference between that fat rear tire, right, and this thinner, narrower rear tire, but they're both 12 millimeters in diameter. So you have to have a 12 millimeter wheel and tire for the back, but you have to have a narrow one. So that's where you've got to come up and be kind of a little bit creative and get some narrower stuff. See, that's not very good with it. That's for the 55, and this one, right, this big thick sucker. And if my wife's watching, she's like, I can't believe he's not cussing. Oh my God. See the difference? So you got to be careful, because you can put these wheels in there, but you're never going to roll them. And then when you do roll them, what's going to happen is you're going to end up scuffing the end of that chrome. So you'll put these in there, you'll be all, yeah, this is badass. And then you'll ruin your wheels. So we'll save these wheels for our next deal, right? Because that's kind of a skirted car. Those are nice hot rods. All right, so again, 1012, in case you're wondering, 95% of Hot Wheels are 10 millimeter is the small wheel, 12 millimeter is the big wheel. Then you got to figure out your wheel width. So even with all the stuff that I have, I have a very limited choice on these 12 millimeter thinner rear wheels. They are out there, of course, everything is, but it gets slimmer. So we're going to make this one a little bit more modern. We'll put in these wheels, which I call whatever I want to. If they're going on a Chevy, they're IROC wheels. If they're going on a Mustang, they are Cobra wheels. Heck yeah, right? So, same basic principle, and we'll get the front out because it's first and easier, and get it out of the way. And we're going to have our mask, not inhale, ventilated room. See how we're pushing that one in, and then just pull it out. It gets soft, and truth be told, you don't have to do anything more than just get enough room to get your angle cutters in there anyways. All right, now in the rear, where it's a little bit tighter, what you want to do is, in this case, push the axle down and out the other side. Now, this one, it doesn't interfere. The axle is still lower than the fender skirt, so you'll be able to push it out the other side, but your wheel's not going to move. So, put you some pressure on that tab and push that sucker down and through, all right? And then while it's still warm, like that, see? You want to pull that wheel out, and it'll just leave the hub behind, and then it'll give you trouble like that, especially if you're on video. And then just go ahead and cut those out. Watch your eyes, make sure your glasses are on. Do not hit your brother in the face with it. And then pull the axles out with your fingernails, right? And then just go ahead and dump those out of the car. Now, for you guys that like to save your wheels, save your wheels. I have buckets and buckets and buckets of wheels. And then you can match them up later if you want to do some sort of weird plastic wheel swap conversion crazy thing. All right, so we've got our wheels out. Everything's cool. We've already picked out our other wheels, and we'll get the front done first. If you guys have questions, just throw them down in the comments and I'll answer them when I get done with the video. Okay, this one, we absolutely know that it needs to be shorter, right? So might as well trim that down without hitting anybody in the eyeball before we shove it in. You can pick driver's side if you want to. Whoops. I just do the passenger side first. It's always more comfortable for some reason, and then muscle memory. All right, so you just work that one in, and what you might have to do is slide the tire in, right? Slide the tire up in the fender, and then put the axle in, right? Now, this one's pretty easy. We don't really have to worry about it. I got really lucky. We'll still check it. You always want to check it. You got to tilt these ones in. Let the axle back, and then push it through. It's not a fully open wheel well. All right, so the axle looks pretty good. And checking your axles is kind of a bum deal. It's kind of a pain because you're like, oh man, I just got that together. But dude, if you don't check your axles and they turn out to be wrong and they're too sloppy and they hang out, and you're like, man, I built that whole nice car and I sure wish I would have checked the axles just to make sure. You see these beautiful custom cars, they paint job. Now I can't get the sucker out. See, this is exactly what I'm talking about. Pain in the butt. See these beautiful cars, beautiful paint jobs, hours and hours and hours of everything spent on them, and the axle's hanging out the end. It's too long and it's all shabby. I'm like, oh my god. Okay, so we know the axle's right. Like I said, with the skirted or no room, slide your tire in to the fender, and then drop your axle in the whole thing. Now on this side, here's where it's tricky, and it is what it is. You get your glue on your axle, just like you always would, and then you angle this in, and you'll see when you try to do this, you angle it in to where you hit that axle in the hole as you drop it in. So you doop, right? You hook it in, and you make sure that when you start the hook, the glue is touching the hole. And I promise you it'll all work out. Everything will be fine. Even if we make a little bit of a mess with the glue behind the wheel, we're going to break that tension and everything's going to be great. So, you've got enough glue between the wheel and the axle, and that bond is going to happen. It's going to melt that plastic to itself and to the axle. So that's going to happen. All right. Now we move to the rear, where it's the same basic principle. But on the rear, on this car and on the other cars, it's much, much tighter than the front was even right there. So here's how I have my axle. It's on the end, the wheel's on the end of the axle, and I'm just going to drop it into it right there. And remember, on this car, the fenders don't come in contact with the axle, so you can actually choop right through, right? And now you've got your axle out the other side, and we're going to trim a good amount of axle off of this one. Get that out of there. And I'm going to leave this axle in the back short. I'm going to cut it a little bit shorter than I normally would, because I don't want to have to push this axle too far back into the car with the glue on it. And you'll see what I mean in a second. So I'm going to make sure that this is completely settled. It's all the way in there. I'm going to cut this down so it's not as long as it's really supposed to be. And that's not going to affect you. It's not going to harm anything, because you have this skirt. The wheel's never going to want to try to walk any farther than the axle will let it in. I mean, the skirt will let it anyways. Okay, so we've got it trimmed shorter than it needs to be. Little tiny dab of glue on the axle, as usual. And then again, okay, you want to try to tilt that in as best as you can. Sorry, I just fell out of my hand. And hit that hole. Obviously, I use my pliers because it's got a thicker front on it. Of course, it's got plastic on it right now. Okay, so we dropped it in, and essentially I got lucky on that one. I'm not going to tell you it's easy, because it's not easy, but once you get this done, you'll understand how to do it the next time, and you'll get it done even better. So the axle is going to come back into the car with the glue on it. There's not a whole lot that you can do about it, but it's going to retain enough glue on the axle and the wheel to have an excellent bond. So there, the axle's already bonded to the wheel, and the wheel spins freely because I've broken the surface tension in between the car and the wheel. So now we've got I forgot to break that one. So now we've got a fully rolling, functional, kick-ass car that we built ourselves. So, from the fairly easy, straightforward, to the kind of advanced, you can totally do it. Just take your time and use your brains and your common sense about what to stick to your fingers and what not to stick to your fingers. And now this car is completely finished if you're doing a wheel swap. The wheels are in good shape, ready to go. They're not going to win any races anymore, but they sure are sweet. All right, guys. That's going to do it. I am actually going to let these two go in the members area. So if you want to become a premium member and grab one of these cars, you got about a half hour to do it. All right, thanks, guys.